Welcome to United's accredited member program, known as AMP. This educational video series is designed to help our members become more informed about a number of topics that affect them. This video will focus on resource adequacy. In other words, it will focus on whether Texas has and will have enough electric generation to meet consumers' demand for electricity. Please be sure to answer the quiz questions at the end. Once you have completed all AMP video quizzes, members will be able to receive up to $25 in energy-saving LED bulbs. Now let's get to today's topic. The energy industry in Texas is at a critical crossroads as utilities wrestle with providing reliable service and affordability, a challenge that has been further complicated by recently proposed carbon regulations on power plants. And while many in the industry are content with the current state of our electric grid, the vision for how we, as Texans, will meet the energy needs of future generations isn't quite as clear as it could or should be. However, United Cooperative Services is at the forefront of helping to shape and define necessary solutions, one of which is educating people like you. There are many sources of fuel for electric generation, but here in Texas, natural gas reigns supreme. More than half of the electric generating capacity is fueled by natural gas, about a fourth by coal, 6% by nuclear, 14% by wind, and about 1% by other renewable sources such as hydroelectric and solar. Combined, the nearly 600 generating units have more than 74,000 megawatts of capacity. One thing to remember is that while Texas ranks as one of the best places in America to produce wind energy, only about 9% of the installed wind generation can be depended on during summer peak conditions to produce electricity. For example, with 10,000 megawatts of wind installed, we can only feel comfortable that about 900 megawatts of that generation will be available when it is most needed, during the hot Texas summer. However, there are times throughout the year when wind generators produce at better than 90% of their capability. Even with all of the generating capacity, the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, which is our state's grid operator known as ERCOT, has issued a number of energy emergency alerts over the past several years. This happens when electricity demand nears available generation capacity, or an unexpected loss of generation units causes operating reserves to drop below ERCOT's target level. At that point, alerts are issued to conserve electricity to maintain system reliability. There are many opinions on how precarious the state's position has become in meeting demand for electric power. The fact remains that multiple calls by ERCOT for consumers to conserve electricity sends a cautionary message. If Texas does indeed have enough electric generation capacity to meet demand, why then the need for the alerts? This prospect should be sobering because recent years' events have illustrated uncertainty in whether or not we have sufficient generation resources to meet Texans' demand for energy. Just go back to the ERCOT-mandated controlled outages that affected every utility in Texas, including United in February 2011, when there was not enough electric generation to meet the demand. Unfortunately, the picture continues to be unclear as to whether the generation capacity issues will be resolved in the near future. Every year, ERCOT performs an assessment of total available generation. As a part of this review, it also develops a peak demand forecast, which estimates how much electric capacity is needed, or said differently, how much energy you and I will use during peak times, such as in the hottest days of summer and the coldest days of winter. The difference between these two numbers is called the reserve margin. According to ERCOT, early 2013 peak demand forecasts led to a reserve margin of 13%, which is below the current target of 13.75% and definitely not ideal. However, the forecast was updated in early 2014, which led to a 16% reserve margin for 2014, with a disclaimer that indicated such a reserve margin would start shrinking in future years. There has been much industry discussion regarding what the most appropriate reserve margin should be. The current target of 13.75% was chosen through a statistical analysis, whereby the ERCOT region would have approximately one controlled outage event in every 10 years. It is clear that the declining reserve margin shows we do have impending generation capacity issues in Texas. Going back to February 2011, it's important to understand why United and the rest of the utilities operating within ERCOT were required to implement controlled rotating outages. Controlled outages are not the same as rolling blackouts, a term sensationalized by the media. Rather, controlled outages involve a systematic approach to shedding electric load in a structured process to prevent a rolling blackout in which the state's grid shuts down uncontrollably. If the state's electric grid reaches that critical point, it could take several days to bring the electric grid back into full functioning condition. Remember the 2003 blackout of the Northeast United States as an example. During a Level 3 energy emergency alert, distribution utilities like United are not only mandated by ERCOT to shed load incrementally throughout their systems, but are requested to begin that process within 30 minutes of the request to do so. Any United member affected won't soon forget when United was mandated to begin controlled outages across its system after the ERCOT request was received on the morning of February 2, 2011. Those outages lasted an average of 25 minutes for United members. A key point to remember is that as a distribution utility, United delivers electricity to nearly 80,000 meters. It does not generate its power. United is one of 16 electric cooperative owners of Brazos Electric Cooperative, which generates, transmits, and purchases power on the wholesale market on behalf of United. ERCOT deals with most distribution cooperatives through their generation and transmission cooperative. Instructions from ERCOT are given to Brazos, and Brazos hands these instructions to its distribution cooperatives, including United. Members should understand that Brazos Electric, and thus United, must comply with ERCOT's mandates to implement controlled outages, or Brazos and its distribution cooperatives would be subjected to hefty fines. Even worse, failure to comply with ERCOT's mandates could lead to an uncontrolled blackout, as we discussed earlier. The ERCOT peak demand forecast is based on average weather profiles and economic factors including per capita income, population, gross domestic product, and various employment measures. The most recent record peak demand was just over 68,000 megawatts and was set in August 2011. This last summer's peak demand, also in August, was just shy of that mark. 1 megawatt is roughly enough electricity to power 500 average homes under normal conditions in Texas, or about 200 homes during hot weather when air conditioners are running for longer periods of time, according to ERCOT. Not surprisingly, weather is the biggest driver of energy usage and our peak. Unfortunately, predicting what the Texas weather will be tomorrow, let alone for the next couple of months or years, is an exercise in futility. Another driver of energy usage is the fact that the Texas economy continues to grow and attract new businesses and residents from other states, thus requiring additional megawatts of electricity. Will we have the new capacity to meet these new additional needs, you ask? Construction commitments for new generation resources have been slow to come for the state, largely due to the low wholesale electric market prices. When wholesale market prices are depressed, there is little incentive to build a new generator at more than twice the cost of the existing fleet. This is because there are many power plants in Texas that were built for $400 per kW, and some for even less. The least expensive options today, which are generators fueled by natural gas, cost roughly between $700 and $1,000 per kW to build, cost which is determined by the plant's efficiency. They'd never be able to compete with the less expensive plants, so investors are leery about putting up the financing for something that will take years to see a return. ERCOT has tens of thousands of megawatts of generation currently under review in various stages of the interconnection process, but many of those projects are speculative and may never be completed, according to ERCOT. Another challenge that has recently developed and could place an additional strain on available generation capacity are carbon regulations proposed by the Environmental Protection Agency. If put into place, these regulations could force owners of some coal plants to shutter those facilities. Building replacement plants fueled by natural gas takes several years to complete, so the planning for that is an ongoing and challenging effort considering the potential ramifications of the regulations. While United continues to work with its power supplier, ERCOT, and other industry participants, and regardless of how the generation capacity issues turn out, the least expensive and easiest kilowatt to contribute to the overall grid reliability is the one you don't use. Energy conservation and efficiency efforts go well beyond reducing electric bills. They play a major role in our resource adequacy situation. So that's the quick overview of our resource situation in Texas. Don't forget to answer the questions. By completing all of the AMP series videos, you'll be eligible for up to $25 in energy-saving LED light bulbs. Thank you for your participation.